My name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm the CEO and founder of Goldberg and Associates. And what I do is solve HR and recruiting problems through coaching and consulting and training services. So what do I love? Everybody's heard of the Haribo Gold Bears, but I think it's my new nickname. It's going to be Gold Bears. I'm a huge avid fan of the Red Sox, and I'm a huge Georgia Bulldog fan, looking to bring a national title for the first time in 39 years. I can't do the math real quick. So just super excited to be here and really appreciate the opportunity that Hiretual and Nin and his company have given me to come out and present. So let's talk recruiting roadmaps. And, it really does boil down to just taking a little ounce of time to plan so that you, in the long run, as a recruiting team, are going to be super, super successful. So, how many of you use a recruiting roadmap to guide your strategy? If you had to pick one, go ahead and type in the comment section to Nin. Let me know. I use a recruiting roadmap consistently to map out a strategy. I haven't used a recruiting roadmap to help me develop my strategy, or what the heck's a recruiting roadmap? Those are, I think we get a lot more on that third answer. But I think that you'll find in the mix, Nin, for those responding, that they know about recruiting roadmaps. It's just, it's not what they use to develop. So I'm just kind of curious, did you get any responses in the comment section?
I did get a couple of responses. People said they've been using recruiting roadmaps and are huge fans of it. I personally have told our to join on this webinar itself, because you'll see later, like we only use Hiretual to hire and grow, which works, but definitely there's different channels that we also need to explore, different challenges you'll see that you'll be talking about today.
But
some said we use mind map as a recruiting roadmap.
Yeah, there you go. Well, no, it's good. So I appreciate everybody chiming in there. So what are we going to cover today? Really, when you look at it, we're going to understand the benefits of the roadmap strategy. We're going to discuss the components of the recruiting roadmap. And Hiretual as a tool is a component of that recruiting roadmap, or it should be. And then presenting roadmaps and strategies to executives, because you're going to have to take your strategy and talk to someone about it. Otherwise, nothing's going to get done. And then how do I keep the roadmap on track? And when I run into obstacles, and what are the strategies for managing those obstacles? So there's a lot to cover in this hour. So let's jump in. So the first thing that I always like to ask is, well, why do you need to have a roadmap? Well, it's going to allow you to come up with a visualization of what your strategy is for managing change, for trying to figure out where you're going next as a recruiting team, and then really securing a future, for the organization overall. It's definitely a proactive way of avoiding costly and disruptive surprises that prevents goals from being achieved. As recruiters, we have all this noise coming in at us, and we tend to get distracted. It's always looking for that newest bell or newest whistle, whatever you want to say, or we're just going squirrel, and we're looking and we're jumping and we're going that way. This really is going to help keep you on track. It's definitely going to create more of a vision on the long-term strategy versus the short-term, right? So when you're coming up with these long-term periods, you're generally talking, 3 years at a time, because this is not something that can be done overnight. A recruiting strategy is something that cannot be done overnight. I think a recruiting roadmap also takes the time to create accountability. So in other words, if you are putting it in a strategy and you're holding yourself or your team or other members, this creates accountability for those that are involved in the particular piece of that strategy. And then it's a great way to really foster or a great way to really measure your results and report on your results to those that have invested in you, i.e. the company that has invested in this recruiting strategy. So let's talk about the components, and there are 4 components. There is the technological component, in other words, your ATS, your CRM, your recruitment marketing platform, your resources such as sourcing tools, content marketing, and recruitment training, and then your processes for recruiting processes for experienced hires, new grads, internal, and then your different recruiting initiatives that you have on there. So whether it be employee referral programs, campus recruiting, any type of diversity marketing or veteran or diversity recruiting or veteran recruiting programs, that's how you break this out. And it helps keep it simple by creating segmentations. And this way, it's going to help you, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, it's going to help you find the people that want to be particularly active in your recruiting strategy, and it puts them in the vertical to be able to help them in what maybe they want to learn or they have experience on, and they can help map out that strategy with you. Because this is not a single effort. It is definitely very much a team effort, and it shouldn't just be you and your CHRO or you and your VP. It should be you and your recruiting team putting this together for your HR executives and eventually the company executives. So what's really involved in this? To me, it's assessing the overall talent acquisition function's current situation. What's going well? What's not going well? Where are we struggling the most? What does our recruiting processes look like? What's the cog in that process? So it's really saying, how can we do better? And asking yourself, what's keeping us up at night that we really need to improve on, or what's keeping our customers, i.e. our candidates or our executives and hiring managers, up at night, and asking them and getting them involved in this. Envisioning, hopefully it's going to help you envision and articulate your team's desired future state. And that's what a lot of this is all about. You're here one day, and then several months from now, or however long it takes you to develop the roadmap, you're going to be here, and you're moving up and along, and you're helping grow the strategy. And then you're going to formulate that strategy and help identify those different strategic objectives. It's going to basically say, this is how I'm going to get there. But you always have to have objectives in place in order to get somewhere. You can't just say, all right, we're going to do X tool or Y tool today and just pray that it works. That's not how it works, folks. So, so really coming up with that strategy, which we'll talk more about. And then finally, the last component is really implementing the strategy itself, and what's involved in rolling things out. And you don't want to, remember, you want to keep the end user, in other words, your candidates and your internal managers and executives in mind. You don't want them to say, oh, it's another HR program, or oh, it's another recruiting program. This is a strategy, and it shouldn't be about holding a big parade when you implement it. It should just be about doing it. So where the heck do I start? Well, before I do that, any questions, Nin, that have popped up? I'll just ask that.
Mostly, is this going to be recorded? Yes, it will be recorded.
Yes. It's always
so, folks, if you guys do have questions for me or Michael throughout the webinar, please leave them in the chat in the QA. Michael is fully ready for all the questions that you can throw at him. So thank you.
No pressure. All right. So where do I start? Where do I even begin with this? So for each component that we just went through, you need to answer the following questions, right? Is change necessary? What's wrong with what we're doing or using today? What are the needs and features that we need, and what is the desired state? And then what happens if we don't change now? And you have to have answers for all of those. If you don't, then it's going to be really, really difficult to build out your different components, whether you're looking at 3 of the 4, 2 of the 4, or all 4 of the major components that I mentioned a few slides back. So as long as, a lot of people go, well, why bother with change? Well, for the leaders on the call, for you guys know that recruiting is changing every day. There are more and more tools coming out. There are more and more applicant tracking systems and CRM tools available today than there were 5 years ago. So there's just so much. So you really have to ask the main question first, which is change necessary? But don't be lazy. Really ask that question and say, yeah, I think some parts of it are need to be changed. What are those parts? And then talk through it. So in the end, you want to be able to show internal clients how, X, which could be technology, programs, initiatives, or resources, how it will benefit them. And you also want to have champions when going to the executives for dollars. So if you can answer the questions above, then you're going to be able to have a lot better chance of getting buy-in from your executives and from the hiring managers. Why? Because you're involving them in the process. And that's so, so important. It shouldn't just be done, in a cone of silence, if you will, where everybody's just chatting, but nobody's talking to the clients about what they want and what their expectations are. So I'm a really big proponent of partnering with your hiring managers and other people on your HR team and get them involved. Talk to candidates. I mean, there's just so much that can be done.
Michael, how do you partner with hiring managers well?
Well, that's a whole nother presentation, but that's a great question. I'll give you the short version, and then if you want to connect with me online, I'm happy to talk through with whoever asked the question, or with all of you. Really, it's learning the business. It's spending time with your hiring manager to understand the needs of the department, what the future growth looks like, what are the skills that will be needed in that specific department or in the next round of hires that you're making. And by taking time and spending it with your hiring managers and spending time in their departments to learn what they're all about, you are going to be 10 times more successful and establish a very successful business partnership. I hope that answers your question. And again, it's very high level, but there are more steps. Hey, come to ERE and you'll learn a lot more, right? Any other questions there?
Yeah, another question from Sandesh. A big part of the recruiting roadmap is predicting future hiring. What are some tips that you have for recruiters?
Sure, that's another webinar too. It's called Workforce Planning. Wow, well, Nan, we certainly are building our arsenal here of future webinars. And so that's another great question. So in building the workforce plan, it's sitting down before the budget goes through and really understanding what the departmental goals are and what the needs will be. What are the missing gaps, or what do they have now, and then what are the missing gaps in terms of skill sets? Where do they want to take? Where does the business want to grow? And are there going to be new departments created, or are there going to be departments that exist today that are going to have a much different look and feel down the road? And if so, are we going to need to make some changes in the organization by hiring in people with different skill sets and understanding what those skill sets are? And certainly I have some tools that if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to share those with you, that allows you to ask those questions to your hiring managers so that you're more confident going in. But workforce planning is a true art and a very, very difficult science. And also a lot of companies aren't into it as much as I'd like to think, or maybe some of the people on this call would think that they should be in, because it makes sense to understand where those workforce needs are. Think of it this way: if your company does succession planning, that's internal workforce planning. So you're identifying, people to fill in for those key positions. And if there's somebody missing from that, and let's say they decide to go to another company, you better have a pipeline of candidates at the ready, understanding what the needs are to be able to backfill those positions pretty quickly, because it is a critical position.
Wow, you want more questions? I have a lot more questions now.
Oh boy. Going down the rabbit hole.
Okay. Bill Borman is asking, wouldn't you start with a workflow first before the recruiting roadmap?
Absolutely. But I include, Bill, that's a great question, or a good suggestion, because as a part of it, when I'm looking at how I go about recruiting day to day, I do want to look at my processes. And I think that's one of the, when I'm looking at is change necessary, one of the first questions out of the gate is our process broken, or how can our process be improved? So I would definitely put that at the high priority list before finalizing it. So there are many different components which we'll dive into here in a moment that'll really expand upon some of the more intricate parts of building out of what to consider. Let's just say that. Anything else?
Awesome. That's it for now. There's a lot more, but
sure. No, and I think for the purposes of time, you can copy and paste those and maybe send those to me, and I'm happy to respond to people either individually or just they can reach out to me with their questions, and I'm happy to respond to them. So, but we'll keep it moving here. But great questions, thank you. So a word of caution. So I had a CHRO who always said to me in my early days, don't go to the buffet table hungry. Meaning, you're going to have all these things, processes, technologies, tools, playbooks, all kinds of conversations about different things, and you want to get it all done now. But you got to map it out so that not everything's being rolled out at once, because that's going to overwhelm your internal and external stakeholders. So just a word of caution. So let's map it out. The way I like to do it is you think quarter to quarter, not day to day, and you always keep the end result in mind. You definitely want to prioritize when you're putting together the roadmap. And I do think, to Bill Borman's point, you definitely want to have your process up there among all else, because the process is what drives that partnership, and it also drives your success and how quickly you can identify candidates and how quickly you can get your candidates to the hiring managers so that they can make decisions and move on to the next task. Because that's what recruiting in HR is all about, which is being a true resource to our internal stakeholders. And then the components at the very end, the components should be brought together into one plan. So basically what I talked about in the white paper, which you'll see next week, is for a client that I worked with for about 8 months, where we looked at what we needed and then what we accomplished. And so basically I want to kind of take you through the thought processes and tell you who was involved. So who was involved? So it's a hospital. It's in East Texas, and it has roughly about 3,500 employees. They've got 7 regional hospitals, and this is a 40-year-old hospital system that really never had a formalized recruiting department. So you can imagine 40 years of really having nothing to putting together what we put together made a huge difference. So here's what they needed. They needed an improved ATS. They needed a CRM, a recruitment, marketing, and media platform. They wanted one of the requests came in that they wanted to have a video interviewing tool and a candidate assessment. So in the 8 months for there, and then the current person that was hired on a full-time basis is taking some of this and putting a lot of this into action, is while we didn't have the money to go out and buy a whole new ATS system, we were very fortunate to have an applicant tracking vendor who was able to customize their system to our needs, which was absolutely incredible. We did, and you would have never heard of this. So if the questions are, well, what was that ATS system? I'm going to keep the names. I'm going to keep names nameless here because I've been asked to. But they're not an everyday name that you've heard out there. We didn't get a chance.
You can share the ATS, Michael.
What's that?
You can share the ATS. Actually, people have asked, what's the ATS?
And of course, now that I'm being put on the spot, I am completely blanking out on that. Yeah. Oh my God. I will. I don't know why I'm blanking out on it, but I will let everybody know. CRMs. We looked at multiple CRMs, recruitment, marketing, and media platforms, and demos were completed. They were supposed to have a decision in May 2019. If there's anybody on the call from UT Health East Texas that's listening, chime into what that name is. I'm sure somebody's on from that, but I can't believe I'm completely forgetting. The video interviewing tool that they went with was WePow, and it's a great tool, but it's on the level with the Conveys out there. And price point wise and ability wise, there's quite a few out there. And then they were starting to look at candidate assessment tools, such as like a DDI kind of tool to really help assess the best candidates, because in a tight labor market in the healthcare space, they needed to have the right assessment tools. We just weren't able to get there in the amount of time that we were there, but we strongly recommended that they look at a different assessment, look at different assessment vendors. So we did choose Recruitix as our recruitment marketing platform. And this is kind of just a snapshot of how we were able to improve. So you can see that in September when we started, we had 2,100 visits. Now look at October, where there was a huge increase, well over 15,000 more visits and more applications. And it did vary month to month, as you can see, but we were consistently in the 5 digits around job visits, and that was great. And then we looked at, these were our sources of hire here. So really, when you look at it, the Recruitix and having a recruitment marketing platform is going to help you understand how your tools that we'll talk about here in a few minutes are performing. And you've got to have a snapshot in a board snapshot of it, or some type of tool. This was obviously done in Excel, or downloaded from Recruitix into Excel, whereby you got to show your successes and then turn that into ROI. So next came the recruitment roadmap on resources. So we needed sponsored content. Whether it be on Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, or specific niche sites and association pages that were related to clinical needs, i.e. nursing, which was our biggest need. We had a sponsored Glassdoor page and postings. We needed that. We established, or what we also needed, like I said, is these niche sites for clinical position postings. We needed better sourcing tools. We needed contract sourcers and recruiters during peak hiring, and more recruiting admin assistant. All right. So let me paint more of a picture for you here. They didn't have any. They had text. They had a basic text to recruit account. They had one recruiter for over 600 openings. God bless them. Woody Creech, shout out to you. What we accomplished, So we created sponsored posts on Indeed, Glassdoor. We had a sponsored Glassdoor page. We did second tier postings on Google and then on the niche nursing sites. We created clinical position postings on the American Nursing Association and nurse.com. We brought in a variety of sourcing tools to help our recruiters source better and to find candidates quicker. And then we worked with a group that helped us hire 12 contract recruiters that eventually increased to 18 to help reduce their high position count. So they were managing 60 positions. And for those of you in healthcare, if you know what I'm talking about, that's a very, very big load. So we broke down those recruiters into clinical and then non-clinical positions. Let's see here. No, it's not. Oh, here you go. So as you can see, here were the results from the different channels. We did have the Work4 Facebook app that really helped us. And if you haven't tried them out, they actually send over fairly qualified candidates. It's basically a landing page that's set up where people go in and fill out their basic information. And because we didn't have a CRM tool, that landing page really helped us identify nurses that were looking for new opportunities. But you can just see the different types of traffic and what we spent and what the cost per application was. So this is a snapshot of 2018 and 2019. Excuse me. So a roadmap on process. So what was needed? Well, we needed a very detailed process. Who is responsible for each step of that process? This is all touching on what Bill Borman brought up. Hiring manager touch points, candidate touch points, doing an overall recruitment audit and SWOT analysis, and then looking at the infrastructure of the entire recruiting operation. So what we were able to accomplish. So we outlined our internal and external process. We outlined the responsibilities. So we created some accountability on both the hiring manager side and the recruiting and recruiting coordinator side to help us with each step of the process. We created those touch points on the hiring manager and candidate side. We completed a SWOT analysis, going in and talking to hiring managers about what were their pain points. And there was a whole slew of them, and that's a whole nother white paper that we can certainly talk about. And we presented those findings to the CHRO and to the chief nursing officer, as well as some of the other executive leadership team on what was needed to be done in order to move forward and be successful. And then we developed a recruiter playbook so that everybody was singing literally from the same hymnal. It had all the processes outlined, all the touch points outlined. It had the technologies we worked with. It had the instruction, like how do you log in? How do you use the tool? I mean, it was a fairly thick online document that we created and put out there for all of our recruiters and our hiring managers to have, so that everybody was knowledgeable about the process. We also put in, because these markets were so small, in Tyler, Texas, Athens, Texas, Henderson, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, places I had never heard of before I started there. We pulled information from the Chamber of Commerce sites. Why did we do this? So that recruiters could sell the towns and sell the opportunities and talk about how wonderful Texas is to live in the winter. And when it's 112, feels like 112 degrees, just like today, that you want to go out and, you want to, if someone's looking to be more outdoors or be on a lake or loves fishing, those are the kind of things that we put in there so that we got people interested in relocating to our area. And then finally, we looked at what was needed around initiatives. So they had a very sporadic employee referral program. It wasn't very consistent. It wasn't manned very well, if you will. In other words, there wasn't a lot of documentation. People had different price points for paying out different things. They needed updated job postings. They really needed a quick way to go out and find talent, which was through job fairs. They needed to really focus in on the larger cities or small towns in and around the Texas border. So obviously Arkansas and Oklahoma, New Mexico, just to name a few of the states where we should be advertising, but also up in the Northeast where it is darn cold, and the upper Midwest. And then we wanted to have employee ambassadors who were going to go out to Facebook and Instagram and share opportunities and share the culture and share why they should be, they being the candidates, should be a part of the UT Health System network and family of employees. So what did we do? Well, we relaunched our employee referral program in October 2019, and the payout through the end of March was roughly $258K, and the average referral was generally about $5,000 for clinical positions. And actually I have it on the next slide, which I'll show. We revised our job postings to be better branding, stating reasons to join the organization, improved overview of responsibilities and the requirements. So it was more like telling a story instead of regurgitating the job description, which a lot of recruiters still do. We held 2 job fairs and 1 meet and greet, which you'll see in a moment, netted quite a few candidates and quite a few hires. We had geo-targeted attraction campaigns in our surrounding states to Texas and the cold climates. And then a social sharing app for hiring managers to share opportunities, which was being built out through the corporate entity that owned the hospital. So job postings are crucial to attraction. So you can see this is what we had before, right? And literally, and if you look at most healthcare job postings today, it's generally the job requirements is a one-liner like you see here below, right? Applicant must maintain RN license, BLS, and ACLS required. ICU experience highly preferred, because this was an ICU nurse, right? Okay, that doesn't really do anything. But if you talk about advancing healthcare together, the future of healthcare in East Texas, why UT Health East Texas, this talks about us, our people, our purpose, our place, why you want to be a part of us, what you're going to be doing, what experience are we looking for in RNs, and then the call to action. So there was no call to action over here, but there certainly was over here. All right. So what were some of the different candidate attraction methods? You can see here, join us for a meet and greet on March 26th from 5 to 8. It's got some of the similar pictures, but it really touches on the mobile applications. And this here to the right is our landing page that we used for our job fairs. So hopefully everybody can see, first name, last name, email address, phone number, the positions of interest. And if you want to download your resume or CV, you downloaded it there, and that would register them for the job fair. And it's just simple things like that you can put in place that are going to make a world of difference to your candidates. So let's talk a little more about the job fair. There were 4 regional offsite events, strong branding and advertising. We had over 1,000 people register. Over the different job events that we held, there were 650 attendees, 120 on-the-spot offers, and 105 acceptances. It's an 88% acceptance rate. And people said job fairs are dead. they're not dead. They actually do work, especially when you have hiring needs of the same positions, especially in smaller communities. And then we had one meet and greet, which was an on-site event. It was branded as a more casual event. We had our chief nursing officer and all of our nurse managers attend and introduce themselves and allowed the attendees. We had about 35 attendees out of the 75 registrants. Ask them questions about working. How do you start? What's it like working here? What's the nurse to patient ratio? They were asking some good questions, and it just gave them the opportunity to learn more about the job that they were potentially going to interview for. We actually started interviewing during that meet and greet. We had 14 on-the-spot offers with 12 acceptances and an 86% acceptance rate. That's not bad. And it's all about taking time to build out one of the things. So once we had it, and we had decided that this was going to be a way to bring in people, we got volunteers and help from everybody at the hospital that made these events truly successful. So again, this is the job form more. This is more zoomed in on what I showed you before. So this is what, from the sponsored posting strategy, they filled out their information here. So you can just see that, so it gives you an idea. And so we've gone through all of this, and now it's time to put this all together, right? So we then decided to take everything that we had talked about and put it into this recruiting roadmap and break it down quarter by quarter. And so this helps you, as you can see, it creates accountability. You set deadlines for yourself. And this can be a living document. So if you need to move things when you're working with your internal stakeholders and your team, make this a living document. This doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all, because there will be some things or some needs that pop up that come down from, whether it be from the board or your executives that say, hey, we really need you to look at X. We know you're working on this, but this is the focus right now. We need you to add that into your plan. So this kind of encapsulates everything that we've certainly talked about here at a very high level. So the one thing you got to know is sometimes you're going to run into rough seas, right? Everybody's going to go through this. And I talk about this in the white paper. So the roadblocks, because it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Turnover was our biggest roadblock. Turnover was extremely high. There was a lack of strategy and vision from the top. There were, like as in any organization, there were all these changing priorities, and we had a tough time getting the buy-in from the managers because they had gone through. They just didn't have the trust wasn't there. So it was up to us to build that trust between our hiring managers and overall HR, not just recruiting. There weren't any established budgets. We were tied down in what I like to call recruiting administrivia, and there were poor reporting capabilities in the ATS. So for every report that I had to generate to my boss, I generally had to go through like 5 to 7 reports in the ATS and double check through the HRIS team to make sure that the numbers were aligned. And that takes time. And so could I have done more without these roadblocks? Absolutely. I've been a part of organizations where the roadblocks, it's slower than usual hiring manager buy-in. I'd never experienced that so much pushback as we had experienced there. And I think it was a matter of having to go in and build trust. And you may have that in your current organization today. And certainly, the question was asked about how do you build hiring manager partnerships. I'll certainly be doing some videos and blogs on my LinkedIn profile over the next few months about talking about that. But I'm happy to talk to you sooner rather than later. So, but just want to show you that it wasn't all great. So the next thing, so you get through the roadblocks, and now it's time to sit down and walk your vision through with your VP of HR, whoever your head of HR is, and eventually the person they report to, whether it's the CFO, the COO, the CEO. You're going to have to walk this through with leaders. So basically, you want to walk the executives through your vision, right? You're going to talk about the why, especially when it comes to talking about dollars. So if you remember, the question before you all got started was, what happens if we don't change? That's where this is really going to come into play. This about why you need the dollars for this, and how it's going to help, how it's going to save in costs, how it's going to save time, how there's going to be a quicker ramp up. Translate that to dollars when you're talking with the leaders, and you'll go a lot further in your conversations and gain a ton of buy-in. Keep it simple. Position your roadmap like a product roadmap. So Nin, you're very familiar. As you were building Hiretual, you had a product roadmap. You still have a product roadmap as how the platform is going to evolve, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Right.
And our stakeholders are the recruiters and users, acquisition leaders, where we ask, hey, what's not working? What can we do? If we build this, is it going to work and make your life easier?
And don't you? And so, not to make this about you, but I wanted to ask you: don't you find that it just helps you translate your vision a lot easier, and you're more thorough in thought?
What it does for us, it puts the plan in something that's executable, like bite-sized pieces that we can go after. And you're right. It helps us bring ideas to life.
Absolutely. So appreciate. I just thought I'd include you because I think it's important that, and I'm sure there's some other product people on the call that would agree. The other thing you want to do is you want to be as transparent as you can when you're asked difficult questions. So when they go, hey, Michael, what's the name of that ATS? Yeah, should I have known that answer? Absolutely. After 8 months, yikes. But you know what? I'm human. And it's okay to say, I don't know, but let me get back to you. So be transparent when you're asked those difficult questions. If you don't have the answer, make them feel important and say, hey, I didn't think of that question. I think that's a great point. Let me go out and research that. Can I get that back? Can I get back to you on that in the next 24 to 48 hours? Right? So you're setting accountability for yourself to get back to the people that are asking you questions. And then finally, know your numbers and your metrics. When you're asked as a recruiter, how many positions are you working on? And they mention, well, I've got a software developer that I'm working on for so-and-so. Oh, well, tell me about that. How's that going? You need to be ready to be able to answer at all times where you are in the process with that particular position or group of positions of software developers. Keep in mind, if you're a leader, you should know your numbers. Hey, we're trending well. We're seeing an average of 10,000 applicants applying a month. We're trying to get that up by doing X, Y, and Z. Our time to fill is still below the norm of, let's say, 40 days in this case. And we really feel like our hiring managers are starting to trust us. And another way, just talking out loud, another way you can build that hiring manager trust and to build that relationship is to create hiring manager satisfaction surveys on a monthly, quarterly, or even after post-position, after every position. I think that gets a little obnoxious. So I'd probably do either after at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, and certainly I've got samples, so happy to share that with everyone. And we would see about an 85 to 90% response rate on those hiring manager satisfaction questions. And then when it comes to candidate satisfaction, you also want to be able to, you want to involve your customers in that, because Everyone's, getting involved in the candy awards or wants to be known for their candidate experience, but a lot of people have problems starting with that. And certainly if you want to talk candidate experience, mark it down, Nin. That's another webinar that myself and maybe even a panel of people, it may be cool to do when it comes to building out your candidate experience situations.
It's a really hot topic these days.
It is extremely hot. All right, so staying on track. Use the agile approach to measuring your progress and success. Don't wait till you've done everything and then start measuring. Measure it piece by piece. Keep your stakeholders informed of your progress. And it can be daily, it can be weekly, bi-monthly, however you want to do it. When you fall down, admit you fell down. You're going to run into setbacks and hiccups along the way. So be transparent. And then finally, you want to ensure the entire team that is working on that. And that's not just recruiting leaders and recruiters and maybe some HR business partners that you have involved, but I'm talking the people that want to get involved, your IT team, if it's implementing a new ATS or a new tool and it's web-based, but it has to go through the VPN in order to be, working appropriately. Make sure that everyone you talk with, including your hiring managers too, that they are held accountable for what they say they're going to do. The biggest wins in life for you as a recruiter or recruiting leader will come when you admit that you've done well and you have met what's been expected of you, or you fell short, but you're held accountable and you own up to falling down and making that mistake, because that's how we all improve as recruiting leaders. So let's sum up the session, and then certainly I imagine then maybe there aren't quite a few questions.
There are a ton of questions.
Of course. So it's nice to be asked. So you want to develop roadmaps with long-term thinking in mind. Focus on the core recruiting areas that will make you and your team successful. That may even be going after low-hanging fruit, right? It doesn't have to be the high pie in the sky. We want all the fancy bells and whistles, because I'll tell you, folks, you can get all those fancy bells and whistles, but I've had numerous conversations with vendors like Nin and with people in his space that say they buy the product, but then there's no change management or training in place to ensure everybody's up to speed on using the full scale of the tools that they're buying. That's a huge, huge miss. If you're investing thousands of dollars or even hundreds of dollars in a particular tool or an applicant tracking system, you as the recruiting leader and your recruiters need to understand the full functionalities of the system. I've gone off track, so let me come back on track here. Before changing, determine what's necessary by seeing how you compare with the industry and your competitors. But don't do something for the sake of doing it because your competitors are doing it. Do it because you believe that it's going to help you, it's going to save the company money, it's going to save recruiters time, and it's going to enhance the candidate experience. And then back to my polar bear, don't go to the buffet table hungry. Take it in small chunks and make sure that you address the problems head on and with somebody else. Don't do this alone, but don't go after everything all at once. So to sum it all up, in the 7 months that I was there, we had over 1,300 hires. We reduced the cost of hire by $1,700 per hire. We increased unique applicant flow by 45%, especially due to our increased web presence and our branding campaigns. And then employee referrals went from 3% to 13% in that 7-month period. So the results are there. And those are pretty good statistics. I mean, normally I had 13 hires in the course of a year when I was working with Freeman and American Heart Association and Insight, which was, when I worked there, it was called Software Spectrum. That was about on average. 13 hires in 7 months, that's a lot. So I think that's so. So after the session, do you feel like, holy crap, I got all these questions, or to the right, smooth road ahead? Look, I'm happy to help you in any way, shape, or form I can. And, I'm excited to have presented you. Here's my contact information. That's me without my gold bears in front of me. So feel free to reach out to me. And I am excited to answer any and most of the questions that time will allow us to.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much. This is all really good information, especially for recruiters that haven't done roadmap and that they're thinking about how to improve their roadmap. I have a ton of questions, so I'll try to get through them as quick as possible. I think there's 20 questions. All right, first one coming up. Joseph Kelly, our challenge is that candidates from